welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. I'm trying to reach 250 patrons. There's currently 220 patrons supporting. So if you want to support the mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media, please do take action now and support the Tough Girl podcast. Please visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. Today, I'm absolutely delighted. We're going to be speaking to Jen Benson, who is 40 years old. She's a full-time writer, full-time athlete, and full-time mum to 2 younger children. Jen's now going to share a little bit more about her life.
I work with my husband Sim, and we've written quite a few outdoor adventure guidebooks. So we've written Wild Running, and we just had the second edition of that out. And we've got the Adventurous Guide to Britain, a couple of walking books, and then I contributed to the brilliant Waymaking anthology last year. So yeah, work is writing, going out, finding routes, great running routes, walking routes, climbing, mountain biking, that kind of thing. And we also do all our own photography. So yeah, it's pretty varied. And then we've got 2 children, they're 5 and 7, and they're busy and energetic, and they come on all our adventures with us. So we quite often have to take it in turns to go running and things, but they're always there. And yeah, so I run as well, and I've done over 50 marathons and ultras. So that's a really big part of life too.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. And I know that there's going to be loads of people listening who'll just be like, oh my God, your life sounds incredible. You know, doing all the adventures and traveling and doing it with your family as well, and all the running that you do. So obviously I want to go and talk about sort of each different section in a little bit more detail. But let's just find out a little bit more about you. Tell us about what life was like growing up for you, where you grew up. Were you from a sporty family? Were you outdoorsy? Did you like sports at school?
I've always been really outdoorsy. I spent most of my childhood in the garden, up trees, that kind of thing. I learnt to ride a bike really early on, and I was given a lot of freedom to just go out and have my own adventures, which I think is really important. I was always climbing massive trees. I'd probably freak out if my kids were climbing at the moment, but and I grew up in London until I was 10, and then we moved to Herefordshire, which is like the least populated county in the country. So that was a big change. And so kind of my teenage years, I grew up with views over to the Black Mountains. And yeah, I was always out running and things. And it was kind of my escapism. And school was always a bit boring for me. And I did running at school, but I didn't really do any other sport at school. But running has always been there. It's always been like whenever there's been an up or a down in life, kind of running's been there to be like my headspace and my me time. And more recently becoming a mum, it's something I did all the way through pregnancy and as soon as I could after having the kids. So yeah, always been a runner, and so more recently got back into mountain biking and climbing since the kids have got a bit older.
Oh, there's like 3 different avenues I want to go down, and it's a real struggle trying to figure out like what should I focus on first. But let's talk more about the running then. So yeah, you've always sort of ran. When did you start getting into marathons and ultra marathons? Because you know, doing 50 is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think I started running sort of competitively in my early 20s. I had a big car crash. And broke lots of things. I couldn't walk for a bit. And then when I sort of came back from that, I just realised how much of a privilege it is to be able to run. And I'd always done it kind of as a bit of a hobby, but I started training and doing marathons. So the first marathon I did was the Snowdonia Marathon. And that was quite a baptism of fire. I got a terrible cramp coming down the last hill, and that was in 2003. So I've kind of been running them regularly since then. The longest ultra, I did the Race to the Stones, which is 100k, a couple of years ago, and that was probably a little bit too soon after my son was born, so that was hard work. So now I just do them when there's one that fits in with life, really. I think expecting Sim and the kids to hang around while I run all day is it's a lot to ask, and we try and take it in turns and be quite equal with our racing, and try and tie it in with a bit of a holiday for the rest of us. So So yeah, been doing it a while. Most recent one was the Imber Ultra, which is up on Salisbury Plain, which was earlier on this year, and that was amazing. It's really local to us, and it's like a proper old school race. It's like how I remember races when I started running, and it's our local running club, and it's 33 miles around Salisbury Plain, and it was just brilliant. It was the day that Storm Freya hit, and there's just no shelter up on the plain at all. So it was a bit of a battle, and I got lost a lot and wore the wrong shoes and did all the wrong things. But it was a fantastic race, and yeah, going to go back next year and try and do it better, I think.
Running is obviously like an incredible part of your life. Why do you enjoy running so much? What is it about it?
I think it's the availability of it. Like, time is always short, and with running you really can just put your shoes on and get out the door, and half an hour, if you've got half an hour and you're a climber or a cyclist or something, it's just not long enough to get a proper session in. But with running you can just get out, and it doesn't really matter how long you've got. It's also such a good way of resetting your mind. We run in lots of different places, so wherever we stay we'll go out for a run and explore, and it's a way I've always explored, kind of a local place wherever we've lived. It's kind of a great way of exploring all the local footpaths and getting to know a place. So it's kind of headspace, and it's exploring new places, and it's kind of that feeling when you get out somewhere really beautiful and you kind of find a ridge line or a beautiful little path along a river or something, and there's just nothing quite like it, and you stumble along upon wildlife that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and you kind of get the sunrises and the sunsets, and it's just, I don't know, it's like it's like a really rich pastime, a rich way of experiencing the world. So yeah, it's really I don't know, it's totally different from any other sport that I've found. Yeah.
I think one of the fascinating things for me is how you've managed to combine like your passions, so like the running with the writing. So one of your first books was Wild Running, which you did in 2014.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that come about, and how did you manage to combine the running and the writing?
Yeah. When my first child was born, I'd been a postgrad student for a while, and because of the way that works, and you get a stipend instead of a wage, I ended up not getting any maternity pay. So we ended up in this position where I couldn't work externally because I had a baby, and Sim was out working all day. So I was trying to find other ways of sustaining us. And we've always loved running, and we've always explored places running together. So before the kids came along, we did lots of mountain marathons and adventure races and that kind of thing. And what we found was that there were lots of guidebooks for mountain bikers and for walkers and things, but there wasn't really anything that was aimed specifically at runners that really looked at the terrain you're running along and the views you get as you're running. It's just subtly different from walking, really. So we were lucky enough to be friends with the publishers of the Wild Guides and the Wild Swimming books, Wild Things Publishing. And we just kind of mentioned it in passing that why don't we write a wild running book? And they took us up on it and said, that sounds great. So we were really lucky. Our first publishing deal was just a casual conversation. So we took a bit of time out and went and lived with the in-laws and for a few months, and wrote that. We travelled around the country and wrote that book. And then after that, everything went back to normal. I was at home with the kids, Sim was out working, and we'd kind of had this glimpse of a way of life that seemed to work really well for us. But being somewhere where we were paying rent and there were all the bills and things, it's quite hard to get established in writing when you've got all those outgoings. So we decided to go and live in a tent for a year, just basically to have an amazing adventure and to reduce our outgoings and see if we could get ourselves established doing something that we really wanted to do all together, and that worked for all of us and felt balanced, rather than, Sim being out at work and missing the kids, me being at home and missing doing anything else. So we took off with a bell tent and lived all over the place, really. We managed to get a field from a local farmer over the summer holidays, which was great, and that was on the Welsh borders. We camped on Dartmoor and we camped up in the Lake District, and we were spending about a month in each place. So we really got to know lots of amazing places, lots of the national parks, and it just gave us that time and space and the ability to live very cheaply for that length of time. And it turned into about 18 months in the end until we managed to get back into a house. But yeah, it really did work, and it meant that it gave us the chance to get established. So now we write for magazines, and we've got a few more books out. So it's now a kind of sustainable way of living for us.
Oh, I love everything you said about that. So definitely want to talk about that, but I feel as though I need to, I want to be really nosy. I just want to find out a bit more about your backstory with how you met your husband and, how you met Sim, because you've obviously found your partner, but also somebody who's really on the same page with you with returns to values and the type of life that you want to live. Because I know maybe not everybody, they say to their partner, I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, let's go back. How did you meet Sim? What's the story there?
We were both working in a climbing shop in Exeter, and we were both at university and working there in our holidays, and then we both ended up working there full time after uni. He's actually 5 years younger than me, so
love it, toy boy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just finished my master's and was kind of trying to set myself up I did podiatry as my degree, and then sport and exercise medicine as a master's. So I was kind of working with runners and things, and then I went into postgraduate research. So throughout that, I was sort of working part-time in the climbing shop, and then Sim started managing the mail order, and took me on as a part-time member of staff. So he was my boss for a bit, and we just hit it off. We were working in a little office, really busy, and we just worked together really well. And we started planning races together, and kind of it went from there, really. And yes, I think exactly like you said, the meeting someone who has that same mindset, that kind of it's not all about career and about getting on the housing ladder and getting a bigger car and all that kind of thing. For us, it was all about the experiences and about spending time together, because we were working for other people, and you spend so much of your time apart. And especially once we had children, like he was working for pretty much during the week, the whole time that they were awake, they were awake. So he'd leave before they woke up and get back after they'd gone to bed. And it just felt like a non-sustainable way of living for us. So yes, I think we've both always kind of grown up doing outdoorsy things. He went through all the 10 tours stuff I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the schools on Dartmoor, every year they have a big 10 tours like navigation event, and I don't know, he grew up with that kind of thing, so he's always been very confident navigating and camping out and things. And we just had loads of camping equipment, so when it came to the point where we weren't sure we could carry on paying rent and living the way we were, the one thing we did have was loads of camping equipment and loads of confidence in our ability to camp safely, even with small children. So yeah.
How old were your children in 2015?
Our son was 6 months old when we moved into the tent, and our daughter was just 3, so quite little.
Oh, I love this. I'm just thinking back to like my niece, who's 3, and my nephew, who's about 9 months as well.
Yeah.
So I almost want to go back to how this conversation evolved. I mean, I get it. I understand what you're saying. You're living this life, you're paying these bills, and actually, so it wasn't working. But where did the idea come from? Like, did it start as a joke, or was it? Yeah, sorry, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd been kind of going along for quite a long time, knowing that we weren't happy with the state that things were in, and knowing that we were going to have to either move to somewhere cheaper and less a place we wanted to bring our kids in, or we were going to have to kind of move back in with parents, which wasn't really an option. So I think I spent quite a lot of time kind of wrestling in my mind about what we could do. And I'm fairly sure I came up with the idea when we were camping. I was just lying there and thinking, actually, this is something we could do longer term. And kind of making that, turning a bit of a crisis into an adventure was something that really appealed. I wouldn't do it now, I have to say. But at the time, I remember we were camping, and I just said, why don't we try and do this for a bit longer, like go on a big adventure. And initially we're thinking about getting a yurt and trying to find somewhere permanent for the year. And we looked into getting yurts and things. But then we actually thought, rather than just being in one place for a whole year, it would be a really good opportunity to go and explore lots of different national parks. And spending a month somewhere, you really get to know it. And especially when you're sleeping on the ground, listening to all the owls and things, it's a really amazing way of experiencing somewhere. So yeah, I'm fairly sure it was all my idea to begin with, but Sim was totally, he just went with it. And yeah, it went from there. And as soon as we'd made that decision, it just felt like the right thing to do at the time. And all those stresses of, can we pay rent next month and that kind of thing, just kind of disappeared. And we handed a notice in, advertised all our furniture, and people came and took all our stuff away. And it was a weird experience. We ended up sitting on the floor the last evening we were there, and all our stuff had gone. And we had this big tent and a wood burner and everything we needed. And it was, quite an amazing experience.
What was the reality like, sort of getting out there? And I mean, I love it. I mean, simplifying your life to a whole new level. But then suddenly you are in a tent in a field with a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old. Small space. I obviously want to know what happened about bathrooms and toilets and electricity. And what was reality like for you?
I think it's important to underline, before we embarked on this, we do have really, Sim's parents are incredibly supportive, and we kind of knew that if anything went wrong, or if the kids got ill or anything like that, we could show up at any time of the day or night with them. And I think that was a really important thing to know. We had a backup plan. But with kind of day-to-day living, we mainly camped on campsites. So especially over the winter, campsites are very cheap, very quiet. And for the first, I think we started in November. For the first 3 months, we had a wood burner. So we had a big bell tent with a hole in the roof with the flue going up. So we had a wood burner in the tent. And that worked okay, but it was a bit smoky at times. And trying to keep a 3-year-old away from the wood burner all the time was a bit stressful. So after that, we tended to stay places where there was either electric hookup, or so either campsites with electric hookup, or the place the field we managed to get over the summer for a couple of months, that had electricity that we could run an extension cable to. And then we got a little electric heater, which made all the difference. And you could just put it on in the tent and it would warm everything up. And it was great, and it was much safer and much cleaner than the wood burner. So the wood burner was kind of a nice romantic thing to start with, but it was actually a bit hard work longer term. I think the hardest bit was probably March, April time. It was quite a warm winter, which was good, but it was quite a wet spring, and we just ended up with so much mud right outside the tent. So we ended up having to put pallets and things down so we didn't get too muddy. So I think the mud and like days and days of rain is the hardest thing, because it's quite hard to entertain, especially a 3-year-old. A 6-month-old doesn't really care very much, but the 3-year-old is quite hard to keep them entertained when there are days of it being rainy outside and it's hard to dry anything out. So the campsites in the winter are weird. You get quite a lot of people who are kind of long-term campers. So the campers that are over the campsites that are open over the winter, you do get the people who like live in a van or a caravan or a tent long-term. So it's quite interesting characters we met. An ex-surgeon from the NHS who had just jacked it all in and gone and lived in his van with his dog permanently and things. So it's really interesting human stories as well. We met over the year. And over the warmer months, camping's just great. So on Dartmoor, you can wild camp legally. It's one of the few places, well, it's the only place in England you can wild camp legally. So over the summer, we did quite a bit of wild camping, just single nights in different places. My son's just come in.
That's okay.
Hello, little man. Huggy, I'll be out in a minute.
Hello.
I did think we've done amazingly well without him coming to find me.
That's okay.
Yeah, so mainly campsites with electric hookup were a real saviour, especially trying to work as well. And then a couple of times we got a barn in Cornwall in the winter because the kids got colds and we were all feeling a bit like we needed an indoor space. So we stayed in a barn conversion for a bit. And then at one point our tent blew down and got really damaged in a storm. So we did go back to Sim's parents for a few nights. So like our deal was that we wouldn't put anyone at risk and we wouldn't put anyone's health in danger. So anytime any of us got ill, we tended to go and find somewhere with a warm bath and central heating. But we did over 300 nights in the tent. So yeah, it was a pretty big year.
How did you manage? I'm not quite sure what the right word is here, but in terms of, I don't know if it's not status and it's not ego, but in terms of making the adjustment or having society's view on you. I mean, I don't know how much that changed. I don't know if your friends are supportive. You know, for me, when I moved back in with my parents, it was like, oh my God, I'm 36 years old. Oh, actually, no, I would have been 33 when I moved back in with my parents. 4 weeks, yeah. 4 years later, still here. And there is that sort of stigma. Maybe did you feel any stigma for living in a tent for this amount of time? Like, how did you manage that side of things?
Yeah, we actually got surprisingly few negative comments. I mean, it was something I definitely worried about before we did it. And then the first few nights, I remember the first night we stayed under canvas, there were weird noises going on, like as if there was somebody creeping around. And I was just lying there thinking, what on earth have we done? Like, I'm here with responsibility for these children, and it was just a fox in the end, so it was fine. And I think I justified it by thinking that people go on camping holidays for a week or two all the time. So it's a bit of an extended one of those. And I also think I wrote a blog at the time and got so much positive feedback about that, because I think our story of being kind of stuck on that treadmill of having to earn enough money to pay somebody else for a house you live in and still not having the quality of life that you really want for all of you. And I think that rings true with so many people, that actually doing something a bit extreme, I think it's justified in a way. I think people understood exactly why we'd done it. We had some people, mostly it was concern really, rather than, nobody outwardly said to us, this is really irresponsible what you're doing and you shouldn't be doing it. But quite a lot of people were concerned, especially when there was bad weather. We got messages saying, are you okay? Do you need somewhere to stay? That kind of thing. But yeah, I think at the time it felt like the only option we had. And yeah, people were really positive about it. I think my parents were a bit worried. I think they were worried from a safety point of view. But you never hear about anything happening to people who've gone on a camping holiday. So sort of rationalising it, I felt like it was a reasonable level of risk if there is much risk. And again, like having that backup of being able to go and crash at Sim's parents was just so important, and it meant that it took that edge of irresponsibility that could have been there off us a bit. And we did several festivals and things and talked about what we were doing, it's been the one thing we've done that people have just been really drawn to and really interested in. And luckily, having spent that time out, it's worked, and it has made us able to live how we wanted to live. And it's still not easy. It's still like, it's, as you know, that like the writing life is such an uncertain one, and you're always having to go out there and kind of find new work, and it's never a definite, but at the moment it's working, it's sustainable. And I think if there were people who weren't sure about what we were doing, or doubted us, or thought we were responsible, then hopefully the fact that we've kind of come round and we're now back living in a house, and it kind of worked in the way that we hoped it would work.
I'd love to talk to you more about sort of adventuring with children as well. So you've talked about running and writing, and running being a big part of both of your lives.
Yeah.
How did that change once you had your little ones?
I think the main change is that we now have to take it in turns to run. So unless we're somewhere like we're not very good at getting childcare, so really the only place we can both go for a run is at Sim's parents, and they look after them when we go for a run. But the vast majority of the time since we've had the kids, we've taken it in turns to run. Early on, when they were little, I'd get out really early, while they were like the couple of hours they'd sleep first thing in the morning. I'd go for a run then, especially when Sim was working, so I'd have to fit that in before he went. Nowadays, we tend to split the day up, so I will work and run in the morning, and then Sim will work and run in the afternoon, and the other one will have the kids. So that works pretty well. We homeschool at the moment, so we're also kind of educating them. But that works really well, and we're both. I've lectured at uni, and Sim's a qualified teacher, so it's something we both love doing and both passionate about. So I think with running, taking it in turns since the kids arrived has been a big one, and we can't race together at the moment, but it's only temporary, and like they're growing up fast, and they'll be more and more happy to kind of go off and spend weekends with grandparents and things. So hopefully at some point in the future we can go back to doing mountain marathons and things.
Yeah. You talked about Race to the Stones, which you did sort of quite soon after your son.
Yeah.
How was that? And was that a race that you'd already sort of booked in and wanted to do, or was it something that you booked in afterwards? And how did you manage sort of the training while having sort of a new child?
It was something I did at very short notice. We got into conversation with Threshold, and they said, "Well, come and run it," and we were going to write about it. And I'd never run that far before, and it was just I just thought I want to kind of prove to myself that I can still take on a big challenge, even after not soon after having it. It was probably within the first year. And so I didn't get loads of time to train. And while I run regularly, I hadn't done enough long runs, really. So I did as many as I could. And I think I had about 5 weeks before the race. And actually, the biggest problem on race day was it was the first time I'd been away from him for any length of time. So I had to be on the bus at 5 a.m, and I didn't finish until well into the evening. So it was a long time to be away from him, which I found quite hard. And I was actually still breastfeeding at the time. So I think the thing that hurt the most when I finished was my boobs. so not feeding all day. I think when you hear about Jasmine Paris and the other amazing mums who do this kind of thing, they do feed en route. And I think that would have been a really good idea, because it does get uncomfortable otherwise. So all these things they didn't tell you. And so I think it was a bit soon, probably, in retrospect. And I'd done marathons before, and that was fine. It's just kind of a bit more of a manageable length of time. But to spend all day out there, and I really struggled with my motivation when I was out there, because I didn't really want to be away from him, and that's just something you don't want to be going through your head halfway through an ultra, is I don't really want to be here. So I did get to the finish, and it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing race, and they were so supportive. But I think I'd ideally have left it a bit longer, or perhaps met up with Sim and them en route. But it's a lot to ask of them to hang around as well. So it's all about balance now, I think, and really feeling like it's a race you really want to do, rather than, I used to race most weekends, whereas now I really consider whether it's a race I really want to do before I go and do it, because it's putting them out as well. So yeah, balance nowadays, I think.
Yeah. How did you mentally flip that switch then when you're running along thinking, I really don't want to be here doing this and I've still got another 30 miles to go?
I really, that race, I really struggled. I will sometimes, I love audiobooks, so I'll sometimes listen to, on the Imber Ultra recently, I hit a bit of a low patch with about 3 hours to go. And I was getting towards the end of Bleak House on my audiobook, so I put that in. It was a really exciting bit towards the end, and I found that really good. Like, I don't listen to music when I'm running, but I listen to audiobooks, so I find that really good. Like, you just get lost in a story, and it kind of takes your mind off the pain and things. But then once you get towards the end, that takes over, that kind of, I'm nearly at the finish feeling. So I think listening to stories when the low points really helps.
One of the books that you've written is Amazing Family Adventures. You and your husband, fun days out and action-packed weekends. Tell us more about that. So how can you continue going on adventures when you do have a young family?
Yeah, that was a book with the National Trust that we wrote. And it was just such a lovely project, because National Trust places are so well set up for families. So you'll go to somewhere and it's kind of adventurous but safe, which is really good. When you've got young children, going on adventures can be really stressful. Like, everything is a hazard, and there are dogs everywhere and cliff edges and unfenced water and things. So actually going to National Trust places, we'd always felt was one of the few places we felt we could relax and just let the kids do their own thing. And they've always got baby changing, and they've always got cafes, so we can always get ice cream and coffee for us and things. So I think going to places that are well set up for families, even though it goes against, I think for both Sim and I, going to places where the adventure is a little bit more organised goes against our adventurous spirits a little bit. Actually, when you have small children, having those things there makes it just so much more enjoyable. So I think when they're younger, going places that are set up for families is really good. And so for researching for Amazing Family Adventures, we basically had to go to these places, run around in the woods, climb trees, test out the cafe, make sure the ice cream was good, go to the playground. So it was such a great project for us. And I think also with the National Trust, there are all these conservation messages. So we'd go to places and we'd look at the different flowers and different birds and trees and things. So it felt like each place is like a learning experience as well as an adventure and together time and things. So that was a really good project for us. And hopefully the book is it's adventures that you can do anywhere. So you don't have to go to National Trust places to do them. But we've then recommended several National Trust places that are good for doing that specific adventure. So, I think that's a really good place to start. I think when the kids were really little, we used to just chuck them in their slings and walk up mountains, and it was really easy. But then they start wanting to walk, and they start getting a bit more adventurous and a bit more disobedient, and then things get really a bit more fraught. So we went up to Yes Tour on Dartmoor at the weekend, which is one of only 3 mountains on Dartmoor, so it's 619 metres. And our 7-year-old walked the whole way up and the whole way back down again. And the 5-year-old needed a bit of carrying. And that was all fine. But then we get to the top, there's a big rocky bit, and he likes to stand up, and it's really windy and things. So it's quite stressful. So I think that, especially when you're somebody who's used to getting outside and climbing and doing lots of things where you've only got yourself to look after, when you've then got a kid to look after as well, it can make adventures quite stressful. So yeah, that balance between allowing them to be exposed to a little bit of risk, which is hugely important, and not completely freaking out yourself is quite important as well. I've definitely found that when you become particularly a mum, even if you're still getting out and doing lots, it's much harder to tell anyone about that. And I went to a Women in an Adventure evening, like a presentation once when I had one of them was very small, and they were wondering where all the women in their 30s basically go, and why people aren't making films about adventures. And I think actually when you become a parent, if you manage to be a parent who has adventures, that's quite a lot to deal with. And then to make a film about it or tell anyone about it becomes even harder. It's like one step too far. So I think there are probably more mums out there doing things, but we just don't hear about it because it's so hard. It's so hard to tell anyone. And also there's the whole privacy thing. So I really try not to put my kids on social media too much. Like a little bit's good, but I really try not to put them on there too much. So I think sometimes people are surprised we have kids because I don't put them on social media very much. So it's also quite hard to put that side of the story out there and to be inspiring when you don't really want to put them on there too much, if you see what I mean.
So what advice would you have for new mums or new mothers or women out there who do have children, or fathers out there who do have children? What advice and tips would you have for them to encourage them to go out and do more adventures with their family?
I think especially with younger children, really getting through the door is the main obstacle, and getting everyone ready and getting them outside. And once you're outside, they're so good at making their own adventures. Like little kids will look under stones and find insects, and that's an adventure for them. And I think not aiming too big is really important, and going and finding, like, asking them what they want to do. So when they're a little bit older, like ours as they are now, if we tell them we're going out and we're going for a walk or something, they will instantly put their barriers up, and they don't want to help, they don't want to go out. It's not like they're busy playing and they don't want anything to do with it. Whereas if we ask them what they want to do, where they like to go, and they have an input into it, they're much more likely to be on board. So anything where they have control. So a lot of places have like waymarked walks where they can follow arrows and things, and that's really good. So you say, like, we're doing the purple walk today, and they get to run ahead and spot the arrows, and then they feel like it's an adventure for them rather than they're getting dragged on an adventure with us, which makes a huge amount of difference. I'd say spare clothes are really important because they always get muddy and wet, and it's really important not to overmanage them when they're getting muddy and wet, because it's part of being a kid and having fun. So we always have loads of spare clothes so they can get as muddy and wet as they like, and then we can just tuck them in a new set of clothes.
I was going to say, it must be really difficult because I mean, I know I don't have children, but I can feel that elements of control, like, no, don't do that, don't go there, oh my god, watch out for that.
Yeah, I hear myself, and I think I just need to back off a little bit and let them be kids, because especially if you are camping or something and it's quite hard to dry things off, you just end up not wanting them to get anywhere near a puddle or anything. I think being a bit relaxed about things like sweets is really important when you're out and about as well, because we try and get them to eat healthily when we're at home, but then when we're going to go and walk up a mountain, like if we're doing something like running an ultra, we eat sweets non-stop. So we sort of figure if we're going up a mountain or something, that's the one time when we don't have to be too stressed about what they're eating as well. So they tend to, I think kids run around a lot and then like crash. so it's really important just to keep them topped up with snacks, and that helps them identify that they're getting hungry as well. So they can always ask for something and always have something. So yeah, regular snacks, lots of spare clothes, carrying them as well, especially like our 7-year-old now doesn't want carrying anymore, which is good because she's getting quite big. But even our 5-year-old sometimes just wants to be picked up and carried for a minute. And I think that's, if you can do it, it's really important that they know there's that option. They're much more likely to be up for going somewhere if they know that if they get really tired, they'll just get picked up. And normally we end up picking him up, and then about a minute later, he'll spot something he wants to do and want to be put down again. So I think that's it really, and making sure they get involved in planning, and maybe packing a few of their own things. Ours have got a couple of little rucksacks, so they pack their own snacks and toys and things, and then they feel like they're part of the whole planning adventure, because they're not that different from grown-ups. We love the planning bit of adventures as well. So yeah, just get them involved really.
I like the idea of just knowing there's somebody there who could pick me up.
Yeah, it would be so nice.
That would be super fun. What was it like sort of leaving tent life behind? So, 18 months living under a tent, completely changing your way of life, and then to moving back into four walls with a roof. How was that adjustment period? Were you ready for it at that point? Do you miss tent life? How's that all going?
I think when we actually managed to get a house, I just wanted to like lie on the floor and just be in the house. It was I'd more than had enough of not necessarily the tent life, but just the uncertainty and not having a space of your own and a bit of privacy. And it's quite one of the big things about living with just a sheet of canvas between you and the outside is when you have a bit of a meltdown, everybody hears it. and hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but there's just no privacy on a campsite. And when you're there for a couple of weeks, it's not so much of a problem, but kind of having to live like that all the time is sort of oddly restrictive, really. You can't kind of sing in the shower and things. So being in a house, the main thing was just having a bit of privacy and a bit of just your own space. And we've got a little garden, so the kids can play really safely in the garden, and that's amazing. So I think there were positives and negatives, and I think the positives are having our own space and having the garden and having just, even now, even a couple of years later, still turning the tap on and water comes out, and having like heating and a loo that's indoors and things. I still appreciate it, which is good because it's something we just take for granted so easily. So yeah, just having your own toilet, and it is something we just grow up with in this country, most of us, and all these things that are just there, like a switching light switches on and things, and it's so exciting for a few weeks, but then it just everything is much more hard work, and it does leave you with a little bit less energy for other things, I think. So, but I also think I often feel a bit shut off in a house because being so immersed in nature was amazing. Like having all the bird song all the time, and you can hear what the weather's doing when you're in a tent. Like listening to, I remember we were in the Lake District, and there was a storm coming, and you could hear the rain like thundering down the valley before it got to us. And that kind of experience of, you never hear that in a house. And I do sometimes feel like with our like walls and double glazing and all that kind of thing, we're so cut off from the space we're in. So I've definitely found I like to have the windows open and things so I can hear outside a lot more. And when we're camping, the kids always sleep better as well. I think there's that like gentle background noise, isn't there, often, and they still sleep better in a tent than they do in a house. So yeah, I miss that kind of feral feeling of being really immersed in the place you're in. And in some of our national parks, it's such an amazing thing to be immersed in. So but nowadays we can always go camping whenever we really want that. We can go and sleep in the tent, and then retreat back indoors afterwards. And working is so much easier now because having to find Wi-Fi in cafes and libraries and things, especially when you've got small children screaming about, is quite hard work. So being able to work from home is amazing.
I love one of your most recent books, actually, in 2018, The Adventurer's Guide to Britain, which I think is, absolutely fantastic because...
Oh, thank you.
so many people think that, and I have to say, I fall into this habit as well, that not that I can't have adventures in Great Britain, but it's almost like I want to have adventures further afield. I feel as though I need to travel, to far-flung places around the world to go on an adventure, and that's almost like my definition of adventure.
Yeah.
But you created this guide, The Adventurer's Guide to Britain. Tell everybody a little bit more about that book.
Yeah, I think we'd spent so long exploring Britain, and every time we go away, we find things we hadn't realised existed. Like last year, we went up to Scotland and we went and explored the islands, and there were places and people and ways of life that, even though we're in the same country, are so far away from our normal everyday experience that it is just like going, going somewhere else. And I think we've spent a lot of years exploring Britain, and we just wanted to put together a bit of a tick list, I suppose, of places and experiences that were just amazing, and that really sum up the type of adventures you can have in this country as well. Like, we've got so much water and different types of rock to climb, and so it's a mixture of scrambling and running / walking. So the running or walking routes you could do either. There's mountain biking, got a little bit of road biking as well. So there's just so many different things, and kayaking, wild swimming. And although it's a small country, there's just such a variety of landscapes and kind of potential for adventure. So we just wanted to, I mean, it just scratches the surface, really. It's the whole of the country, and we could do that size book for every county, really. And we hoped it would kind of inspire people to go somewhere, try the adventure we've recommended, but then we've given them a lot of other information about each place, and other possible adventures that you could have there. So we're very keen on, rather than having like a tick list where you go and, I don't know, do the highest peak in however many different places, that you base yourself somewhere and explore everything that area has to offer, kind of a much more sustainable way of adventuring. So you support a local community and you really get to know that place, and I think that's a much more enriching way of adventuring, really. And it's sort of something we all need to start doing a bit more, rather than just like driving between different places and things. So yeah, we just wanted to put together some of the best experiences we've had, because I think the running books we really enjoy, but it kind of misses out the bits we do in between the running, like the mountain biking and swimming and kayaking and things. So yeah, it's all in there.
What was the most sort of surprising adventure that you went on, which almost like you weren't really expecting, or you thought, oh, I didn't even realise that this was a thing, like I didn't know that we could do this?
I think the Isles of Scilly were quite a surprise for us, because we spent a lot of time in Devon and Cornwall, and sort of assumed that the Isles of Scilly was just a bit of an extension to Cornwall. But it is like being somewhere else entirely, and they're just so great for adventures. So you can, they've got like white sandy beaches, so you can swim in this clear sea just off the beach. You can run around to, a lot of the islands are easily circumnavigable, so you can do a trail run all the way around the outside of each of the islands. You can kayak between them. Like, some of them are uninhabited, so you can, like, within a couple of hours on a boat from Cornwall, you can be kayaking out to uninhabited islands and watching puffins and things and seals, and it's just like a little microcosm of adventure. So I think that was probably one of our biggest surprises, was going there, and yeah, there's just so much there. It's just little islands, and everything's just subtly different.
What adventures stroke holidays have you got coming up in the coming months?
We're back up to Scotland next week. We'll probably go for about a month, I think, because we need to be back we're doing Top of the Gorge Festival down in Cheddar. So I think we'll spend between now and then exploring more of Scotland. It was the first time I'd really been, like, I've been on trips to do various things, but it was the first time I'd really been and spent a lot of time in Scotland last year. And it feels like, rather than going and ticking things off, we just made our things we wanted to do there much longer. So we wanted to get over to the Isle of Egg, which just looks wonderful. And I think that it's the most eco-friendly island in Britain, I think. So that looks fantastic. And we'd quite like to get over to the Western Isles as well, which we didn't get to last year, out to Lewis and Harris and things. And do a bit more scrambling and exploring the coast. So yeah, we're quite excited about that.
Yeah. Are you currently writing another book at the moment?
We are. We've got a couple on the go. We are writing a running book for the National Trust, which is coming out next year. So it's great to work with them again. And we've got a walking book with Bloomsbury, who published our Adventurer's Guide to Britain book. We're doing a family walks book with them as well. So a couple of really exciting projects coming up.
Oh, fantastic! I love this. Honestly, it's so it's so inspiring to hear more, about your journey and about making that really hard decision to go and live under canvas for 18 months to drastically change your life. And I'm so pleased that it's all working out for you.
So yeah.
Where's the best place for people to find more information out about your family, and where can they follow along with the journeys and buy the books?
Wildrunning.net is where you can find everything about our wild running book. You can buy the book, and that's where we put our running routes and things. And adventureplaces.co.uk is our kind of general adventure blog, more about us on there. And once we have a bit more time, we'll put more of our adventures on there. But that's where things like going to find the fossil tree on the island of Mull, and wild camping on Dartmoor, and lots of exciting, hopefully inspiring adventures are on there at the moment. So those are the two best places to go.
Oh, Jen, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your story and your journey. It is so inspiring. I'll be making sure that I put all of the links to your social media, to the books that you've written, to your websites, etc., so people can come and follow along and hopefully go on more adventures, which is what we want everybody to be doing.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jen and it's inspired you to think a little bit more about how you can adventure close to home, whether that's in the UK or whether it's further afield in places like Australia or America. So maybe just have a little look outside and see what is right on your doorstep which you haven't found or discovered yet. So one of the things which helps to spread the word about Tough Girl Podcast is you, my incredible listeners. Thank you so much for telling your friends and family. Another powerful way to do that is actually leaving reviews on iTunes. So we're currently up to 188 reviews, which is amazing, and I'd obviously love to hit 200. Just going to read out two of the most recent reviews in June. So the first one is hi there. So thank you so much for leaving a 5-star review. And it says, I am so grateful for your work. The range of voices you are recording are so important and helping me learn about what makes it possible to get out there. I'm really focused on my own adventures now and how to share them to inspire others. Loads of kisses. So thank you so much for taking the time to leave a review. I really appreciate it. And Belina also left a 5-star review. Can't stop telling everybody about this. Whoop, whoop. Thank you so much. So she goes on to say, I love this podcast. It's so inspiring and it's got me plotting to do my own adventures. I'm always telling friends and colleagues to start listening to it too. The messages from all sorts of women are so positive, even from women who have come across really hard times. I love that it's raising the profile of women and it's such a positive way, in such a positive way. We need more of this in our lives. So a massive thank you for taking the time out to leave a review. It really does make a massive difference because obviously, I don't have a marketing budget. It's me on my laptop or me on my phone helping to promote and share these incredible stories. There are over 200 episodes now of amazing women, all ages, all background, doing a whole variety of different challenges. We're coming up to the 4th year of the podcast. So the 4th of August 2019 is going to be the 4th birthday for the Tough Girl podcast. And I couldn't have done it without all of you. So thank you so much for taking the time out to listen and support me. I really do appreciate it. If you can't financially support via Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast, retweeting, commenting, sharing on Instagram stories, telling your friends and family about it, telling your work colleagues about it. It really does make a massive difference. What I mean by that, if you know somebody is trained to run a marathon, for example, or they want to start going to the gym, or they want to get outside more, nudge them in the Tough Girl Podcast direction, because hopefully by listening to those stories, it will inspire them to think about what they could do and how they could do it. And by hearing other women who've been in a similar situation, it will inspire them, and it'll cause this massive positive ripple effect, which is what I'm really going for. So a massive thank you to everybody. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are, whatever you are doing. So much more information to come about what's going to be happening over the coming a couple of weeks. We've got some incredible guests coming on. I'm definitely doing a lot of special stuff to help celebrate the 4th of August. So make sure that you are following along on Instagram stories at Tough Girl Challenges, on Facebook at Tough Girl Challenges. I'm also on Twitter at _tough_girl. And obviously don't forget to check out the website, toughgirlchallenges.com. Boom. A lot of information being sent at you, but have an awesome day. I will speak to you soon. Make sure you subscribe. New episodes every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. All right, take care. Lots of love. Bye.